And welcome on in to the latest edition of the Blue Horseshoe podcast. He is George Bremer. I am Ryan Hickey. Welcome on in, George, to where a podcast on a Tuesday here where the vibes I feel like are pretty high. Pretty high. 2-1 start right now for the Colts, alone in first place in the AFC South. I'll be honest, George, 3 weeks into the season, did not expect this type of positivity and this type of record, frankly, to be talked about as sitting here going into week number 4.
I mean, we've been talking all year, manage your expectations. That was the theme of the pod. And, record doesn't matter. Just develop a young quarterback. No thought in my mind that 3 weeks into the year, they'd be in first place in the division, that they would have 2 road wins, 2-0 on the road for the first time since 2013. Wow. So 10 years since they started 2-0 on the road. I believe I just read this, so you'd think I would have it in my head, but it was the first time they had back-to-back road wins since I think 2019. It's been a while. So, some really big things early on here in the Shane Steichen era, which I think we talked a little bit about it on the post-game pod, but his fingerprints are all over this team already, just in terms of competing through the whistle, playing hard every one of these games. Let's put it this way. They've come a long way from defensive linemen doing snow angels next to their injured quarterback.
To sum it up very succinctly, 100%. They have come a long way since that New Year's Day infamous effort. We'll put effort in air quotes against the Giants, where the season was there. You talk going through the motions, George. Yes, we have come a long way since basically the start of the 2023 calendar year to where we are right now, going into or about to start the beginning of October. You said just before, managing expectations. That's been really the motto, right? The theme of this podcast. Well, maybe it's time to revisit those expectations. With this hot start so far, I think it's time to revisit our preseason picks. I had the Colts going 5-12. You had the Colts going 4-13. They're halfway there, George, to your win number. So we'll go back and look at the schedule and discuss, now that we've seen this team for 3 weeks, how good actually are they? And speaking of good, that defensive line, George, has been tremendous so far this season. We'll give you some numbers to back up right now through 3 weeks, how dominant they have been. So we got a loaded podcast here for you midweek. But let's continue the good vibes and the good play, George, and start with the running game, where we look at right now, Zack Moss in his 2 games since returning from the broken forearm has been tremendous, has been a godsend for this team. 210 rushing yards, 2 total touchdowns. And it begs now the question, George, again, small sample size, but still, with JT, this, at least we expect this upcoming game against the Rams to be the last one Jonathan Taylor misses. Now with Zack Moss playing well so far in his absence, does this beg the question, if you're Chris Ballard, does it make it easier to trade Jonathan Taylor now that at least Zack Moss has shown you he can be a reliable force in the running game?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about all the things we didn't expect. This is going to be right at the top of the list. I think Moss is 8th in the NFL in rushing yards right now, which he missed week 1. So that's an incredible number right there. And the post-game pod against Jacksonville, people can go back wherever you get your podcast, go check out that post-game live pod. If Jonathan Taylor was there, they win the game. That was one of the overarching themes. What we didn't know is if Zack Moss was there, they probably win that game because of the way that he's run since. 18 carries for 88 yards in Houston, and then 122 yards career high for him in Baltimore. I think the Baltimore game, what made that so impressive is the Ravens knew what they were going to do. Anthony Richardson wasn't back there being a threat to run. Everybody knows that Gardner Minshew is not going to throw the ball deep. That's not his game. They knew it was going to be quick underneath passes and that they were going to have to lean on the running game. And Zack Moss still went out there and had 122 rushing yards. Now, that being said, this team is still better if Jonathan Taylor's back. There's no question about that. He is a next level running back. He's a totally different guy. And if you get him out there, the offense will go to even another plateau. But you do have to wonder now, if you're Chris Ballard and you've got a disgruntled running back who's wanted to be traded since July, as you sit there now in first place in the division with Zack Moss running more than adequately for you, is it are you more inclined to take an offer that maybe, on cut down day, you were just not even going to consider?
I would still say no to the answer for two reasons. Number one, I'm still worried badly about the depth of this team. Zack Moss has been tremendous, but like you look behind him, like part of why he's been so good is because they've fed him carries because there's no one else behind him. They signed Trey Sermon this past week. We saw Trey get a few carries as well, but it's basically Trey Sermon and Jake Funk. Neither of the Colts right now seem to trust. So if they're, God forbid, it's an injury or just, hey, look, he's banged up, has to miss a game, I have no faith in that running game is going to look, very good. And I think it's going to look a lot like it did in week number one, where you have basically 1 yard per carry on the ground and not getting any sort of momentum. So I am worried still about the depth in the sense that Zack Moss has been tremendous, but there's nothing behind him. And if he goes down, and we unfortunately see the running back, injury history is always very high, very scary depth still behind him. But also, too, George, now that, we see how the Colts offense has played out so far through 3 games, right, without Jonathan Taylor, I think you look around the league right now, you see how the running back depth has played out in a lot of other teams as well. We've seen, obviously, the Browns, right, with losing Nick Chubb, they decided to sign their old friend in Kareem Hunt. Is Kareem Hunt, Jonathan Taylor? Absolutely not. But just signing Kareem Hunt, at least take them out of the Jonathan Taylor, we'll call him sweepstakes, I'd probably say yes right now. And the team that was at least rumored, right, reported to be the most interested and the most motivated to get a deal done with the Miami Dolphins for Jonathan Taylor. And we just saw them 2 days ago, George, run for 350 yards. So I think Devon Achane, so now I see he doesn't want to be called A-Chain. I think it's Devon Achane from Texas A&M. I think he's still running for a touchdown and running all through that Broncos secondary. So the one team that at least reportedly was the most motivated and the team you had the most talks with in a Jonathan Taylor trade back in August, well, their 2 running backs in Achane and Mostert are carving up right now defenses. So I just don't know, like if you're Chris Ballard and you want to trade, let's say, or maybe open more because of Zack Moss's play to trade Jonathan Taylor, unless I'm missing someone, George, I just don't know where that offer, if you are firm on that offer of getting a first pick, where it's coming from.
And that's one of the big things that we talked about when he wasn't traded on deadline day, was that the market was probably going to shrink, and that they were going to need somebody out there, to have a major injury, a contender, that leaned on the running game to have a major injury and want to get into that market. Well, Cleveland was that team, but as you said, they filled that hole with Kareem Hunt. It seems unlikely that they want to give up anything of value now to get Jonathan Taylor. The Dolphins just scored 70 points and probably don't want to give up anything of value at this point for Jonathan Taylor. I don't know why. That wouldn't be a smart move on their part. Maybe Green Bay. I mean, that's not. It's a market of one. That's not a market. I mean, they're not going to bid against themselves. So they would, I'm sure, set a really low bar. So I tend to agree with you. I don't think the offers are going to be better than they were on cut down day. And again, the depth is, a serious question here. Trey Sermon had 5 carries on Sunday. I think he was in for 18 plays, which is a lot compared to what we have seen first week with Zack Moss, but it's not what you need to take, the load off what's become a bell cow running back in Zack Moss. And Sermon also had a big drop on a 3rd down screen pass. Ended up not costing them, but at the time it was a huge play. I think because of that, you want to build that depth. You want to make sure that you have a 1-2 punch in Taylor and Moss that could be pretty good. That's a flip side of this, is that if you get Jonathan Taylor back out here and Zack Moss is continuing to run the way that he does, they're 2 different style runners. I mean, Taylor definitely has power, but with him, it's that home run speed, that ability to pull away, make those ridiculously smooth cuts. How quickly he changes direction. I think that's one of the things that makes him so special. A lot of guys, you need a couple steps in there. There's at least a second there when you come to the hole and you change your mind. It's always been so fluid with Taylor. It just kind of happens almost imperceptibly. And then with his speed, he just takes off. So, there's almost a thunder and lightning kind of element there. If he's able to come back, pound the ball with Zack Moss, hit him with, the speed of Jonathan Taylor, and then you throw Anthony Richardson into the mix, that'd be a very difficult run game to defend. Probably would pull some of those safeties down. I think you'd see a lot less too high looks, start to load up that box a little bit, maybe get Alec Pierce a little more involved, let Anthony Richardson start showing off his deep arm. These are the reasons you want Jonathan Taylor back on the field. One of the things I wonder now is what's in Jonathan Taylor's mind? At worst, at this point, worst case scenario, he will be joining a team that's 2-2 and tied for first place in the AFC South. Potentially a 3-1 team alone in first place in the AFC South. Does that change his mindset? I mean, as you look at it, the big contract's not coming this year no matter what. I think that's already done. Even if he's traded, you would figure that anything that gets worked out, there's an extension for next year. This year, you're playing on the deal you've got. Yes, if somebody else wants to extend you, you've got that confidence now of if you're injured, you've got something to fall back on. But if you're Jonathan Taylor, does your mindset change a little bit with the way this team has played? Because I'm sure he was thinking like most of us in the preseason. His expectations were probably pretty close to what everyone else's were. But now you're looking at a schedule that's not a murderer's row, as we've said before, a division that's struggling even more than expected so far in the first 3 weeks. And you can come in and make a real difference for this football team. Does it change your mindset?
I think it should, because if you're Jonathan Taylor, right? So far, what you've seen through 3 games, we had questions with the offensive line, right, going into the season. And so far, they have blocked, especially in the run game, really well. And again, you're seeing Zack Moss in a game in which, like you said before, the Ravens knew basically what was coming. And still that offensive line, along with Zack Moss, was able to run for over 100 yards because they were able to assert their dominance and assert their will. So you have an offensive line right now that's still on the way, but looking to regain their 2020, 2021 form. So if you're Jonathan Taylor, you got to look at it this way. I think you're right. He's not getting an extension this year. So now you got to start to think, how can I put myself in the best position to get paid next year? And I think right now, if you're JT, it's still with the Colts, because you know the offense, right? So you don't have to, there's no acclimation point of learning a new playbook. Again, there's going to be an acclimation point for him anyway, because he hasn't done any football activities since December. So you're still going to need to knock the rust off, and it's still going to take a few weeks for you to get back on your A game. So at least with the Colts and Indy, you know the playbook for the most part. I know it's changed, obviously coaching changes, so obviously it's a new playbook, but he's been around that team, so at least you think he knows it pretty well at this point. Even though he didn't practice in training camp, he's been at the practices. Now, if he was, paying attention, different story, but at least he was there. Physically, he was there. So you think at this point you have a familiarity with the playbook. You have an offensive line that's blocking for you. And now with the way Zack Moss is running, if you get, let's say, 60, 65% of the snaps, that is still enough to where you are getting a good workload, but also you're not being run into the ground, right? We've talked about the running back game where you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If you don't play, you're kind of like Le'Veon Bell and, oh, wow, you're going to be rusty and it's not worth giving you a contract when you miss this much time. We're going to pass. If you do play, it's, well, here's an extra 200 carries on your body. Are we really going to pay you after now all that wear and tear, another year, of damage on your body? We're not going to pay you either. We're going to pass. If you're at least Jonathan Taylor, you can look at this season of offensive line's blocking well. Zack Moss is running well. So I should, in theory, come in, be able to have equal and more success than Zack Moss has had so far on less carries. Isn't that the best case scenario? More success, less wear and tear. That's why I think if you're Jonathan Taylor, you should be looking at this start so far and saying, you know what? I didn't get what I want. But now if you start to look ahead and accept reality for this season and then say, how can I put myself in the best position to get paid next year? It's with this Colts team right now.
And I think that last point is a really solid one about the wear and tear, because that's at the top of his list of concerns. The reason you want the guaranteed money is you think you're going to go out there and have 30 carries like Zack Moss did on Sunday every week. And you saw what happened to him. Got banged up. He was in and out of that game. He showed his toughness, and he kept coming back, and he obviously finished with 122 yards, so he was still effective through it all. But that's your worry when you're running back. You're going to go out there, and you're going to get banged up, and you're going to suffer some kind of injury that ends your season, and then you're never going to get your big payday, a la, unfortunately, Marlon Mack, who lived that nightmare. And then unfortunately is again dealing with another Achilles tendon injury and is out for another season, but that, I think that comfort might be the most important thing, even more than the team's record. The fact that the offensive line is playing as well as it is, and the Zack Moss is playing as well as he is, and that you could actually, like you said, maybe be in 65% of the snaps instead of 100%. That to me might be the biggest factor that could change Jonathan Taylor's outlook right now.
I mean, because think about it, right? The first 2 years he was healthy, 2020, 2021, he was the guy. There was no split carries. There's really no one there to give him a spell more than like a play or two. So he was running the ball a ton, catching the ball in the backfield. He did it all in the running game. And again, in the passing game as well. Now, if you at least have a guy in Zack Moss who can, especially in short yardage situations, goal line situations, and just in general, hey, I need to drive off. I'm tired, especially as you're working your way back to the lineup. And that just helps preserve your body going forward. And again, if you need some time, and just helps put you in a better position to where at the end of the year, you are playing at a high level, but also preserving your body enough to where you can feel like I still have 3 or 4 years to give. I think if you're Jonathan Taylor, again, maybe excited is not the right word because again, he's still frustrated, but it's like you have to look at this start to the season and think, for me getting paid, this is the best case scenario for this team right now and how they're playing. And now, too, you wonder on the flip side, George, forget about just like how Jonathan Taylor views his team, right? I think another question is, how do his teammates view Jonathan Taylor? Because right now, if you look at it this way, I mean, we are coming off a win in which your backup quarterback, your backup running back, and your backup center went into an undefeated team's house and won a game in overtime, gritted their way through it. And so even if you don't beat the Rams and you're 2-2, but especially if you do beat the Rams and you're 3-1, and Jonathan Taylor, let's say, comes back and is activated off pup, but still is kind of dragging his feet and not all in. I think also, too, if you're Jonathan Taylor, part of the reason why I think you have almost no choice but to be kind of all in if you come off pup on this team is you lose the support of locker room. I think there are a lot of guys in training camp understood his feelings, right? And sided with him, even though it got ugly and it was almost portrayed as a Colts versus Jonathan Taylor. I think a lot of players sympathize and empathize with Jonathan Taylor to get him paid. But I think it's also, if you're a player, easier to do that in training camp where you're worried about yourself. You're worried about getting better. You're worried about winning a job, being a starter, making the team. Now, all of a sudden, if you're a player, you're worried about wins. And if you're 3-1 right now with Zack Moss, and again, you win a game in which Gardner Minshew is a quarterback, and then you have Jonathan Taylor, who is still the best player in offense coming back, and he's not all in, I think that's where he loses the support of the locker room, because if he's still dragging his feet and still kind of, woe is me for not getting paid, I think a lot of this locker room, George, is like, well, we're 2-2 or 3-1. We have a chance here to win the division, make the playoffs. Like, that's where everyone's focus should be. And that's why, too, I think if you're Jonathan Taylor and he's on the roster, like, I don't think he has an option to mope or drag his feet or still try to, pull any sort of leverage over the Colts, because I think at this point, with how the Colts have started, now it's about winning. And you lose the locker room because now all of a sudden, if you're not in, you're out.
Yeah, I mean, definitely at this point in the year, once you're up and running, you're either with us or against us. I mean, that's the mentality of the locker room every year. It has to be. You can't really approach it any other way. And sort of on a related note to what you were talking about, a little bit of a tangent too. I think one of the reasons that they have played as well as they have is that they've all bought in so much to Shane Steichen and what his message has been, and the way that he's come in as a leader of this team. And so I think that makes it even more of an idea that they're going to rally around that. They don't want somebody to come in and disrupt that. And hats off to Shane Steichen, by the way. We were talking on Sunday in the post-game pod about no excuses. That's the way this team operates with them. You talk about no excuses from him. You've had, from the very first day of your very first training camp, a standoff with your star running back overshadowing everything about this organization. Your star rookie quarterback comes out and looks really good and raises expectations of everyone, and yet hasn't finished any of the 3 games and has missed one of them completely. Your center bounces back and is playing really good football, and he misses the 3rd game of the year on the road. And you're 2-1 anyway. I mean, at the end of the day, I think Shane Steichen deserves a ton of credit for living that no excuses mindset that he's put out there. But I also wonder, look, through this whole thing, he and Jonathan Taylor seem to have had a pretty good relationship. Even when Taylor was out there at practice with the hoodie up, scowling, there were times at training camp where he and Shane were talking on the side or talking in the end zone, and it seemed incredibly cordial. I think even Jonathan Taylor has bought into Shane Steichen and this no excuses mindset, and that might be another positive the Colts have in this situation moving forward. We won't know for sure until next week. I think Wednesday, honestly, might be one of our first checkpoints. We were talking about this before we started recording. Is Taylor on the field during practice? You know, is he there on the sideline on Sunday? Those would be really good signs. But I do think the fact that the other 53 guys on the active roster and the 16 guys on practice squad have completely bought into this head coach. Yeah, for Jonathan Taylor now, those 69 guys are going to look at him and say, get on board or get lost.
I was just trying to look at the Colts Victor cam after the game. I forget which play. I think it was Dallas Flowers. I have to double check. But one player run off the field is basically like, look, no one thought like we were any good. Like now we're showing you like we knew we were good. Now you're starting to see it. So to highlight your point, like the belief, like this is a legitimate belief. So they are all in on Shane Steichen. And to your point, like if now all of a sudden you start to see the light at the end of the tunnel of, okay, well, hopefully Anthony Richardson could be back this week. And if this is the last game of Jonathan Taylor missing, like I said, I think a good, like if you're Jonathan Taylor, I think you bring up a good point, George. Even though he's still not eligible to come off PUP for one more week, he should be. I think it's in his best interest to start being at practice and start being truly involved in going forward, being at the game on Sunday, because like you said, the belief is there now to where if you are not all in, then get out. And again, if you don't have the trust and belief of your teammates, that's where I think the leverage of Jonathan Taylor, again, trying to get a new deal or trying to get sympathy on his side. I think this Colts 2-1 start is completely wiped any of that away, because now all the players are worried about, rightfully so, is winning. Like now there was, I think when we went to the season and we assumed, okay, if Jonathan Taylor's on the roster week number 5 and he's a Colt and he comes back to the lineup, I would have bet in August, okay, the team is going to view him as a savior, right? Because again, you look at this offense, it's like, well, who's really going to step up? Like, is Deion Jackson really going to now run the ball well? No one really believed that. So we would have thought with a rookie quarterback, without Jonathan Taylor, come week number 5, it's, oh, okay, guys are the best player in offense is back. The savior's back. Bow down. Jonathan Taylor's here. And he's viewed by everyone as a savior. Now, when you're 2-1 and Zack Moss is playing really well, I think you like that thought is gone. And it's more like, okay, you're a guy, either you're going to help us out and you're going to fall in line, help us get a win, or you're not. And you know what? Might as well be traded because we don't want, that bad energy around this team. It's been something where I think Jonathan Taylor, again, I think it's a good best case scenario, because I think, again, you want to have someone kind of taking the workload off your shoulders and have someone that makes your life easier going forward here. But it's also one of those where I think you lose any sort of support or sympathy from the locker room, because now it truly is about winning. And that's a credit to Shane Steichen, because right now, as we're sitting here 2-1, there's a real belief in this team that, again, they could make a run here. And it's not like they're winning with smoke and mirrors, right? It's not like they are just pulling the Houdini act and, oh, okay, now all of a sudden the book is out on Shane Steichen come week 7 or week 8, and everyone around the league figures them out. They are winning, frankly, through toughness, through grit, through determination. And that's not something you could figure out or that gets solved in a week or two.
Zack Moss talked about that yesterday. I think that's up on YouTube somewhere. Someone was asking about the 4 pillars that Shane Steichen has thrown out there. I can't remember all of them right now. I know character, relentless is one of them.
Compete. I think there's
preparation.
I think that's a 4.
But Moss said when he came in, it wasn't what they want to look like. It was made clear to the team, this is what we're going to look like. It wasn't an option. This is what we are going to do. And I think that's why the players have responded the way they have. They want that from a head coach. He didn't come in, hopefully we do this, hopefully we do that. I want to do this, I want to do that. He came in and said, this is who we're going to be, and this is how we're going to get there. And I think players responded to that immediately. And you've seen it. Go back to they had Zaire Franklin mic'd to your point about the players running off the field, he said pretty much the same thing before the game. He said they're all talking about them. We're going to make them talk about us, after this game. And they did.
Backed it
They've
up.
backed up kind of their mindset right now. So, yeah, it's only 3 games. They've got a long way to go. There's still a lot of work to be done. But at the end of the day, it's a very positive start for this team. And I think the most important thing is that they are all on board. They are clearly one unit together with a single mindset and a single mission. And that was not the case last year. That was obvious to everybody that was not the case last year. And so I don't think, obviously Jonathan Taylor can help this team tremendously. You're going to add him to this roster. Everything they've already done. We already talked about it earlier on this pod about how much this could help the offense. But I think at the same time, he's got to have the right mindset and he's got to be on board too. And I don't think the locker room will accept anything less than that.
I agree. I 100% agree. As you start to look ahead now of just like reassessing our expectations for this team, it's like through 3 weeks, I think they are kind of making everyone rip up their predictions, their preseason predictions. And now it's okay, we got to rethink what this Colts team looks like. So let me ask you this, George, really fast here. I'm going to go into the assumption going forward here, Jonathan Taylor is going to be a member of the Colts for the rest of the season and is going to be a good soldier in the sense that he won't be loafing and he'll be out there still competing hard and playing hard. Are you under that assumption as well?
I don't think he has leverage to do anything else. So, yeah.
I agree. So with that in mind then, of Anthony Richardson, hopefully fingers crossed this week, but if not in the near future, return to the lineup. Jonathan Taylor now return to the lineup, hopefully next week as well, and seeing him, again, progress and hopefully get back to the old Jonathan Taylor form. As you look at the schedule, George, as we talk about a 2-1 Colts team with the Rams coming to town on Sunday, I said before the season 5-12. You said 4-13. I just went through the schedule before, and I want to go through it with you here just to see your thoughts. Honestly, I'm starting to think about like an 8 or 9 win team. Like this, you look at this schedule going right now, where you have the Rams coming to town on Sunday. You watch the Rams on Monday Night Football against the Bengals. You saw an offensive line that's very susceptible. As the Bengals, I think it was 6 sacks they had of Matthew Stafford. And we'll get to the Colts D line in a second here, but no reason to think that they can't mirror the success the Bengals had against Matthew Stafford on Monday night, why they can't do that again on Sunday. So you have a Rams team that's right now like the Colts, or I should say right now, a good matchup for the Colts. And I believe we're talking about on Sunday. I know the line may have changed a little bit, but the Colts were right, George, were favorites for this game when the initial spreads came out on Sunday night. And I don't see why coming out of Monday's loss, why that would change and go the other way whatsoever. So you have a game, at least that Vegas believes you should win against the Rams at home. If that's the case and you go to 3-1, you look now going ahead, George, the Titans come to town next week. You look at Tennessee, look, bare minimum. I think I will guarantee on this podcast, George, I feel pretty confident saying it. The Colts are going to split with Tennessee. They are not going to get swept like they have the past few years. This Tennessee team is not very good. And this is a Colts team that's plucky enough and tough enough, frankly, which they have not been in recent years, to go and bare minimum win at least one against Tennessee.
Yeah, no, I agree with that all the way around. They are still a 1-point favorite. The line didn't move after last night, so 1-point favorite against the Rams. I think a split with Tennessee makes perfect sense. And you look, further down the schedule, side of Cincinnati, who was always red hot in December, and that's when the Colts, unfortunately, that's where they got the draw there. On the road down there in December, that seems like a really big ask. Other than that, I don't know if there's another game that you go in there thinking they're going to be a significant underdog in this contest.
I mean, even it's crazy to say, George, but like I said, so you have the Rams this week, which Vegas believes you should win. You have the Titans coming to town next week, which I'm going to go on a limb now and say Colts probably going to be favored in that game. If not, the spread's going to be basically a toss-up at home. So again, definitely a winnable game. You should split against the Titans. Then you go to Jacksonville, which again has been the house of horrors. But at least so far, early on, you mentioned it before the podcast, Colts won in Baltimore for the first time since 2009. So Shane Steichen early on has maybe proven to be the streak buster, the streak snapper. Now he couldn't snap the week 1 drought this year so far. So maybe he'll be able to snap the Jacksonville drought. But you look at the way the Jaguars just played at home against the Chiefs, which I get it. The Chiefs are actually this year having a good defense. but then followed that up with a 20-point home loss to the Texans. It's not like right now the Jaguars are these world beaters that we thought they would be in the preseason. So again, history right is not on the Colts side in Jacksonville, but now that is definitely a more winnable game than we thought maybe even after week number 1. So okay, that's now 3 games in a row where Rams, Titans at Jags. I don't think it's crazy, George, to say they should win 2 out of those 3 games. Bare minimum 1 out of 3. Like if we just play it super conservative, 1 out of 3. Okay, there's 3 wins right there. Then you have the Browns coming to town in week 7. Toss-up game. Browns are a good team, so maybe you lose that one. Okay, but you look at the next 3 games after that. Home against the Saints, who have not looked very good whatsoever. At the Panthers have looked horrendous. And Bryce Young, shocking to me, has looked easily like the worst rookie quarterback of the 3. And then the Patriots game in Germany. But again, Saints at Panthers, Patriots, with the way the Colts have played, with the way those 3 teams have played, I don't think expecting 2 out of the 3 wins there in that little 3-game series is outrageous or asking too much.
No, and that gets you to 5. I mean, if
5.
on a conservative arc there, that gets you to 5 wins, and right about midseason, that because the bye comes after the game in Germany. So that would be matching your total and ahead of mine at the bye week.
So you're talking about if they, let's just say, do what we just said there, they're 5-5 through, like I said, through week 11 after the bye. That is way better than I think anyone anticipated. And then you look ahead, Buccaneers come to town after the bye at home. And again, the Buccaneers off to a good start, 2-1, but also they don't look like world beaters where that's a matchup where you say, oh, that's definitely a loss. Again, at home, early to say, and we'll see what injuries dictate, but maybe they'll be favored, especially if Jonathan Taylor's back to town. At the Titans. So again, if you want to say that they lose or the Colts win when the Titans come to town in a few weeks from now, maybe they lose that game at Tennessee. But also, I don't think it's crazy to look at Bucks at home at Titans in that 2-game stretch and say they go 1-1. So if that's the case, right? We're talking about, okay, 6 wins going to week 14 at the Bengals. I would assume by that point, right, the Bengals usually are on their A game by the time December comes. Okay, a loss. Okay, fine. Right, that's the one game we talked about. That's one where there's really no chance that's going to be the highest, the toughest game you'll have to face going the rest of the season. Then you look at the final 4-game stretch, George. Steelers at home, which honestly, they lost, but they frankly should have won last year. And that was a team that gave up on Monday Football. So the Steelers, to me, have not really impressed or looked that great, even though they are 2-1. Steelers come to town. You're at the Falcons. Raiders come to town, home against the Texans. 4 games, Texans, Raiders, at the Falcons, Steelers. If we're talking about conservatively a 2-2 team through that 4-game stretch, that's 8 wins, George. That's 8-9. I think we're not being unrealistic. We're not getting our hopes too high or giving the Colts too much of the benefit of the doubt. This is a very manageable schedule from how the Colts have played and how the rest of the league has played so far, where 8-9 is not unrealistic. And with the way the Jaguars have started, 8-9 has you bare minimum in the mix. In the mix.
If Jacksonville doesn't figure it out, I think Calvin Ridley's hurt. I think I read that that he got banged up during the Texans game. I don't know how serious that is or how long he would be out, but I think he at least got a knock in that game. So, if Jacksonville doesn't get it together, if they don't figure it out, Colts could definitely be in this mix. And as you said, that's a conservative reading of this. So, 8 wins. The rest of it could be 9, it could be 10. There are games in there that are toss-up games that we're not giving to them right now. It could 10-7 would be unreal because at that point you'd be in the wild card hunt, even if Jacksonville gets red hot and runs away with the division. It's still a long way to go. I mean, that's the bottom line of all this, and when we saw last year. But I think when they were 3-2-1 last year, it felt a lot different than 2-1 right now. And because of what you were just talking about, smoke and mirrors, they were 3-2-1 specifically after beating Jacksonville on as up tempo a game as you probably play in the NFL. They went no huddle the entire way. They threw 58 passes. It was not a sustainable plan. They knew it. It was just something they did to get through that week. None of this has felt that way. Yeah, the Ravens game was insane. I think I said it was one of the drunkest Colts games in recent memory. but it wasn't smoke and mirrors. It was just grit. It was just the defense saying, I don't care where you give them the ball, they're not going to score, and giving the ball back to the offense until the offense was able to finally put the game away. That is not sustainable either, but it's not the same kind of smoke and mirrors that we saw in that 3-2 start last year. Now, things are going to change. Guys are going to get hurt. But I think you can make the argument that this Colts team has as much potential as anybody in the league to get better than they are right now. If you get Jonathan Taylor back, and he is the 2021 version of Jonathan Taylor, and you keep Anthony Richardson healthy, and he builds from week to week, which we haven't really got a chance to see him do yet, and you get Shaq Leonard, his legs under him, and he even gets back to 75% of what he used to be. Those are three players individually that could change a season on their own, that if you get all three of them back, then that 8-win total might be severely conservative. But, we'll see how things play out. I know this much. There is significantly more optimism at this point in the season than I ever imagined there would be, say, back in July.
Same. And that's part of the reason why we kept harping on wins don't matter in 2023, because we did not think there was going to be a lot of wins, to be honest. You're talking about a rookie head coach, a rookie quarterback who, with Richardson, again, we didn't really know what his learning curve was going to be and how developed he would be for the NFL game, considering he had just 13 starts at Florida, and it was up and down. It was a dramatic roller coaster ride for the Gators last year, where the ups were very high, the lows were very low. And it's like, well, is that really going to be sustainable? And how many lows are we going to see in the NFL? And even though right now, again, he's not finished a game, right? He's not been able to take a knee to finish out a game or be on the field for the final snap through the first 3 games. They're still persevering. They're showing depth that we did not really think they had on the offensive line, at quarterback, in the run game. They have stepped up big time, George. And like I said, they're doing so with arguably their 3 best players, or the three of their most important players, either hurt or not on the field. And so it's, I don't think it's unreal. Like,
still limited.
Right. And the fact that right now they're still, and it's also not like they're playing 3 horrific teams. It's not like it's, okay, you played the Texans twice, you played the Bears, and maybe sprinkle in the Cardinals as well. Like, it's not like you're playing like the easiest part of your schedule. You played 2 playoff teams in the Jaguars and the Ravens. One on the road, you won. And again, you took care of business against a inferior Texans team that we saw on the road as well, which is impressive, that we just saw handle Jacksonville. So it's also like they've had good tests early on, and so far passing those tests with help on the horizon. Hopefully Richardson back in the lineup this week. But again, you think even if he can play against the Rams, and even if they lose that game, it appears at least he's going to be back on the field sooner rather than later. Him traveling with the team to Baltimore, I think, is a good sign that hopefully he's sooner, returning to the field sooner than later. So it's like there is, like I said, there is legitimate optimism for the first time. I mean, honestly, since 2018? Just because in 2020, you had Philip Rivers there. So it was like a different optimism because, okay, they're better than I personally. I'll put my hand up. I was, of course, the quarterback I was least excited for in the quarterback carousel between Andrew Luck and now Anthony Richardson. The one I was least pumped for was Philip Rivers, and go figure, he was the best out of those fill-in guys. But it's like also you kind of knew in the back of your head, it's not sustainable because Philip Rivers is not going to be around that long. So you still have to find the answer eventually. So it's like really 2018 with Andrew Luck when they really kind of had that upswing starting in October, where it's like, wow, this is legit, but this also feels sustainable going forward. That's really the first level of optimism, where there's a level of excitement, but also there's a level of this is sustainable now going forward for the first time, George, I think since 2018.
Yeah, I mean, Luck's last game when they go out there, because I still remember being out there in Kansas City, and the feeling after that game was, man, they just ran out of gas, but the way they finished the season, and with Luck and some of these other pieces they have around him, and at that point there was a lot of optimism about the Reich Ballard pairing, and it just felt like everything from here was up. And then 7 months later, franchise fell apart, and they've still been recovering from that day. The Luck retirement, they're still in the process of that. But there's no doubt since that day that he stood up there and announced his retirement, this is the most optimism there's been around this franchise long term.
Right.
There were moments, like you said, 2020, but you knew then that Philip Rivers wasn't going to be here for 10 years. Even 2021, when they won on Christmas Day in Arizona with a really depleted roster. Even then, though, it was still Carson's been up and down. There wasn't a thought of he's going to be a 10-year starter. Now you're sitting there thinking, hey, if this kid can deliver on the promise that he's shown in 5 quarters so far, and this young defense can continue to come around the way they are. You get Jonathan Taylor. There's just so much more optimism, and you're sitting there thinking if you can add a wide receiver, which obviously they've been trying to do. I mean, that much we do know that's been a priority for this team. So you figure that'll be a priority in the offseason. You're looking long term. You add a couple more weapons. By the way, Josh Downs played a really good game on Sunday. We didn't really talk about that a lot, and he is legitimately the number 2 guy on this team right now, which is pretty good for a rookie, and adds to this optimism. You talk about the connection between him and Richardson, and and I think the most important element of that right now is Shane Steichen looks like the right guy right now. I mean, I think I texted you at some point during the game. He might be the guy, just because of the way that went. Also, and I don't want to, before I forget this, French fries is 1-0. And that was definitely McDonald's fries on Sunday.
That's right. You are 100% right about that. We even got a franchise reference on the broadcast as well on CBS, but you're right. They are, and give them credit, they played well in the second half against Houston, but now as starters, 1-0 in the French fries regime. Like you said, McDonald's fries on Sunday, which was clutch. But like you said, too, with Shane Steichen, I mean, you look right now what he's doing. Him and Jonathan Gannon have been doing 2 of the most impressive coaching performances this year. I know Mike McDaniel is the one getting a lot of the coach of the year talk because the Dolphins are literally unstoppable on offense right now. But you look at doing more with less, right? I mean, especially offensively, 1 hand tied behind your back, just with a rookie quarterback in general for Shane Steichen. Now 2 hands tied behind your back with Gardner Minshew in the rain. Go into Baltimore and still produce enough offense and make enough plays to win the game. He has been doing a tremendous job. You see the innovation that he has brought. You see the creativity he is right now providing to this offense. And it just, again, the level of expectation, right? The level of accountability he is holding everyone at, where there's no excuses. It's easy. You could easily went into this year and say, guys, we'll see what happens, right? This is a prove year for everyone. So you could almost throttle down on the intensity because, you make mistakes. Okay, well, the wins don't matter. So hopefully you learn from it. Like you said to start the podcast, I think, which is massive. There's no want to, there's no hope. This is what we're doing. And if you don't play to this level, if you're not matching my standard, you're out. Like it's either get the job done or nothing. It's not, oh, well, we tried. Oh, we were close. Like, oh, we battled hard for 58 minutes. And you know what? Oh, shucks. We didn't get the win. Hopefully next time we will. It's no. Either we're going to win or it's going to be a massive failure and everyone's going to pay for it. And like I said, that level of accountability, it's palpable. You feel it. And the way they're playing right now through 3 weeks, George, like the guys are buying in. And that standard Steichen right now has brought to this team is really right now a major difference between this team this year and the team last year.
I think one of the things you look for in every NFL season is how's the team going to respond to adversity, because adversity comes for everyone. It doesn't matter. Even Miami right now with their 70 point, they're going to face adversity at some point this year. Everybody does. The Colts did right away. Day 1 of training camp when John Taylor went on PUP. But talk about the adversity on the field that they faced in Baltimore. The conditions, the hostility of that environment for them. The fact that the Ravens, even with 8 starters out, are still a really good football team. And Lamar Jackson's still one of the most dangerous guys that you can face in the NFL. And, not that this team had the baggage, because most of them weren't here, which is probably good. But the last time they went to Baltimore was one of the bigger collapses that they've had. That fourth quarter there, you blow a huge lead, you miss field goal that could have won it. This time around, the Ravens missed the field goal that could have won it. It just, you've already seen it. Normally, that's, I guess, a long way of saying, normally when a team gets off to a good start, it's like, well, what are they going to do when they face adversity? This team's already done that. We've seen them come through adversity. Now, doesn't mean that they're going to finish, 16-1. Look,
you're not predicting 15 straight wins, George?
I'm not going to rule it out at this point.
16,
but
it'd be 16 straight wins.
The way they're playing. But you know, you've already seen them in all the environments that you want to see. They've already checked a lot of boxes. They've come from behind. They've held on to a lead, and held off a team that way. They've dealt with backups coming in and playing. Like in 3 weeks, they've already faced a lot of things that you wonder, how's the team going to respond to, and responded well.
It's a good point, right? It's not just the Jonathan Taylor, fiasco. It's the fact that, right, they've had to play a full half without Anthony Richardson, have had to play a full game on the road against a good team with a backup quarterback in Gardner Minshew and a backup running back and a backup center. Like you said, it's not one of those where everything's breaking right and, all the fumbles are going their way and you're catching teams at the right time. They've gotten lucky in the sense that they have played right now 3 teams that have not been 100%, right? The Jaguars had offensive line issues. Texans, put it kindly, have had offensive line issues, and the Ravens did as well, like I said, with 7 starters out of the game against the Ravens on Sunday, or against the Colts on Sunday. But it's also on the flip side, the Colts have also had their own injury troubles. And again, their best player in offense, Jonathan Taylor, is not there. So it's not like, you are getting breaks in a way that you're not catching teams at full health, but also you are not fully healthy as well. And again, when you're playing through 3 games, basically half your season on the backup quarterback, it's basically 50-50, right? Anthony Richardson and Gardner Minshew, and you still win 2 out of the 3 games, you got something cooking in the right direction. And a large part of that, George, to start this tremendous 2-1 start to the season has been the defensive line play, especially. The front 7 has been elite, but especially you look at that defensive line, how they're playing right now. Lead in the league, tied for second in the league in sacks with 12, leading the league in tackles for loss with 23. And you look at the 3 guys right now tied for the team lead, George, in tackles for loss, 3-way tie. Kwity Paye, Samson Ebukam, EJ Speed. I think all 3, too, for different reasons. You love to see their names here. Kwity Paye, we talked about him. This is a big year 3 for Kwity Paye. Can you kind of break through? And so far through 3 games, he has. Samson Ebukam, we've gotten on Chris Ballard, right, for his lack of splashy impact free agent signings. Well, Ebukam, off the top of my head, unless I'm missing someone, has been maybe the best free agent signing so far in the Chris Ballard era with his immediate production. If I'm missing someone, again, please yell at me. I don't mean to shortchange anyone, but so far he's been tremendous. And EJ Speed, Shaq Leonard's backup, has been able to, when he's been asked upon and called upon to make some plays, has been clutch. Had a few big tackles for loss on Sunday in Baltimore. He's made a lot of plays when asked to. These are 3 guys, but again, it goes to the overall front 7 unit. They have been a big reason why right now the Colts are 2-1.
At the very least, Ebukam is on that Danico Autry trajectory, and they've
Eric
missed
Ebron,
him
I guess, too. Yeah,
since he left. Since Autry left, they've been looking for a guy to fill that role, and Ebukam
right.
seems like that guy so far. I think this is going to be the first of well, not the first, probably already the 30th of many mea culpas to come from me. Things that I expected to happen, but one of the biggest concerns I have was the edge. How are they going to get the pass rush? How are they going to put together, good play on the edge when you looked at, Paye and Odangbo and their injury histories and them still being relatively inexperienced. And then you brought in Ebukam and you're like, that's what you did. That's your big move. And then, Tyquan Lewis coming off of this 2nd straight knee injury, it looked like a major area of concern. Right now, it's a major area of strength. They've all played well. That entire group has played well on the edge. But Paye and Ebukam in particular, like you said, among the league leaders in tackles for loss. They both have multiple sacks already this year. I think Quiddy's got 3 and Ebukam's got 2. EJ Speed is this year's version of Zaire Franklin, coming and taking full advantage of the opportunities that he's gotten, showing that, maybe he's, and Franklin said it, it was Shaq who said last week, he's always been this guy that he's just getting a chance to show it now. Zaire Franklin looks like a defensive player of the year candidate early in the year. It's just the young secondary has played better than anybody thought. There's another mea culpa. Juju Brents came out and had an incredible debut for him. So hats off to him. Some of that goes to Gus Bradley. He's been aggressive, I think, in terms of how he's called this defense. But that front 7 in particular, we said going in, they had to dominate. That if they were going to win this game, they're going to shock the Ravens. They had to have a dominant performance from the front seven, and they did. Again, 3 weeks in, and the front seven right now, I don't know, was it Vikings in the 70s? I mean, who do you compare them to right now?
The Purple People Eaters. Let's go. We need to start thinking some new names, some new nicknames. The Blue, I don't know. Yeah, I got to workshop some.
There's four of them up front in their Colts, so four horsemen.
Four horsemen. I like it. Let's go. Maybe I could see it right now. Sports Illustrated in December. You got DeForest, you got Grover, Ebukam, and Quiddy on the horses in the practice facility. Hopefully, it's like one of those Clydesdales because, I don't know if Grover on a horse, that's calling him the big guns. Can't have a racehorse holding up Grover Stewart.
No, that's going to be rough for the horse. There's no question.
Yeah,
nobody can stop Grover, by the way. Once again, it's second time he's done this in his career. Just lining up over the center, and the center panics and mishandles the snap. That's happened twice now in the NFL. That doesn't seem like reality, but that's Grover Stewart.
He is he's having the interior line effect of Myles Garrett. Did you see this on Sunday? If you didn't, look it up. It is very funny. So the Titans basically shadowed Myles Garrett for a play where if he was on the left side of the line, they put two tight ends. If he was on the right side of the line, put two tight ends. I guess throughout the game, the Browns realized this. So they basically put Myles Garrett in motion. They started on the right, ran him to the left. The two tight ends got up, ran to the other side of the line. Then he got up and then ran to the other side of the line. And the Titans got to delay a game because they couldn't get set because Myles Garrett's running back and forth. Now, in the interior, you're not moving that much. You're not obviously shadowing a center with Grover Stewart, but it's kind of the same effect of Grover Stewart lines up over the center. He's already getting scared and already, like you said, he can't focus on the snap because he realized, how the hell am I going to block this behemoth of a man? And Grover Stewart's having a similar impact right now in offensive lines.
I got to look that up.
It is so
It sounds
funny.
a little bit like the Colts Ravens back and forth there on the field goal, where the second time through the Ravens just took their time on the sub, and Shane was funny about that too yesterday on the call when somebody said, I think Greg Doyle asked him about the meme that's out there of him kind of shrugging, and he said, yeah, they're I guess one of the defense coaches he knows pretty well just kind of looked over, caught his eye, and was just smiling, laughing, and Shane's like, yeah, what are you gonna do? We tried, but it's that kind of stuff. I think has been really fun to watch too. The chess game that's being played, with Shane Steichen, with Gus Bradley. I think Jim Bob Cooter deserves a lot of credit coming in here, getting this offense up and running. Tony Sperano Jr., we're going to give him credit throughout the year. He had probably the most important job on this team, and so far he's done extremely well. But this defensive front, if you're going to give an MVP for the season so far, I'm going to give it to the entire defensive line, all four of them, the four horsemen. They're my MVP right now.
The four horsemen. And you brought up too before, the biggest thing they're doing as not just outside of just dominating, getting to the quarterback consistently, and again, getting the backfield consistently. You mentioned before the secondary with all those young corners, especially where now we saw Juju Brents make his debut on Sunday against the Ravens and again, looked solid. I think a part of the reason why you've seen Dallas Flowers not get exposed, Juju Brents not get exposed, and Darrell Baker Jr. not get exposed is because the defensive line is getting to the backfield so fast that you don't have time to sit back there and pick apart this defense. And they are doing a tremendous job right now of forcing and speeding up the offense, putting the quarterback off their spot, having them drop their eyes to where now one of the biggest questions of this team, period, in the secondary with a lot of their inexperience on the outside of corner, it's being masked and covered up because right now this front seven, all they're doing is consistently generating pressure and consistently speeding up the offense to throw them off their trail. I mean, again, outside of Calvin Ridley in the first half, George, which again makes sense. He's a great receiver. And we saw kind of, still trying to work out the kinks a little bit in that secondary. Outside of that first half where it was like 7 for, I think 92. He had 7 catches, 92 yards and a touchdown. This secondary has been, for the most part, pretty shut down when they needed to be. And in large part, look, they've played well, right? To their credit, it's not all the defensive line. But in large part, that front four and that front seven, they've gotten home consistently, and they've been able to help the secondary out by speeding up right now the quarterback and the offense, and they've done a tremendous job. Tremendous job.
And again, they're doing this with Shaq Leonard playing. He played 69% of the snaps on Sunday. I think he's been around there so far for the season. He's been limited. He's not been out there in situations he's normally been out there. So if he continues to get his conditioning back and get his legs under him, defense, just like we were talking about the offense, could get even better by adding, an all-pro player to the mix. I was looking up the numbers. I can't find the specific numbers, but to your point about the way the defensive line is affecting the passing game, I think the completion percentage for opponents right now is pretty high. It's like 69.1 or something like that. But the yards per completion is something like 9.7, 9.6, 9.8, somewhere in that range. I think it's just showing you exactly what you're talking about. They're making them get the ball out quick, and that young secondary is coming up and making hits, and it's limiting the big plays. The longest pass play of the season against the Colts is 32 yards right now. I would not have made that bet in July.
Right, especially when you look at, I mean, CJ Stroud's throwing the ball well so far as a rookie. I know the rain helped a little bit on Sunday against the Ravens, but still, like that was, like I said, I can't remember really one explosive passing play whatsoever in that game. And again, outside of really Calvin Ridley in the first half, there's not really an explosive passing play in the second half for the Jaguars. They have done a really good job. And again, the defensive line especially has done a really good job of dominating and just taking care of business. And again, when you look at this upcoming game against the Rams, look ahead for a quick second. That's one where the Rams offensive line is a question in general. Got banged up on Monday night as well. So you should be facing a hurt, if not, maybe a backup or two on the starting five for the Rams on the offensive line. Another game in which your front four should dominate. And also credit to Gus Bradley too of changing things up where he blitzed a lot more on Sunday than he did really than what he's known for. So he's also keeping offenses and offensive coordinators off balance where you think for the most part, Gus Bradley's going to play one certain way of more, rush four and drop seven. And he's again, keeping guys on their toes by changing up the looks, changing up the blitz patterns, and still kind of playing a guessing game and being unpredictable, which also is now helping this defense be through 3 weeks, being one of the best in the league. They are truly one of the best defenses right now in the NFL with how they've played.
Yep. Statistics are not going to back that up.
Right.
But if you watch the game, it absolutely, has come to fruition. And I think a lot of that is situational football. They've just been so good getting stops when they have to. I'm probably going to harp on this all season, but those 2 stops in overtime at midfield, you just don't see that. And I think that's the mentality of this defense right there encapsulated in 2 drives.
They have been clutch. Outside of those 2 drives in the fourth quarter where it was touchdown, interception, touchdown for the Jaguars, that turned what was a lead for the Colts into a 2 touchdown or a 2 possession deficit that eventually led to their demise. They have been clutch. And again, clutcher earlier than I ever would expected in week number 3. Like you said, they're making big plays offensively and defensively to win high leverage games. It has been tremendous. It has been tremendous, George, and now it leads to a lot of optimism, a lot of legitimate optimism for the first time in a long time. And as we get set to look ahead to Sunday, George, it's crazy to think we are expecting now this team to go 3-1. What a start. What a start. What a young season so far here for this Colts team. We'll get a lot more into Sunday's matchup against the Rams on our Thursday pod. So if you're checking us out for the first time, welcome. Appreciate you. Make sure you do subscribe to YouTube Blue Horseshoe Podcast or check us out wherever you do get your podcasts, Blue Horseshoe Podcast. Bright blue logo is our new feed where each and every brand new episode gets uploaded there. So make sure you subscribe to that feed so you stay up to date with everything Blue Horseshoe pod wise. It's going to be a fun preview, George. It's going to be a fun preview against what is going to be a fun game, I think, against the Rams. Tough opponent coming to town, but the optimism, it's flowing. It is even a month ago, George, this has been a season where I think I would already, even just 3 games in, call it a success and call it more fun than any point last year. This is a lot of fun. This is great.
It's definitely more fun than any point last year, but I will, because I always got to rain on and pray a little bit. The one thing that I can't call a success yet is that they got to keep number 5 healthy. Before I can call it success, they got to keep number 5 healthy. That's the one, to me, that's the one downside to what's been an incredibly optimistic and encouraging start.
And obviously, by the time Thursday's pod comes around, we'll have some updates on the practice availability of Anthony Richardson to start this week. We'll also be on Jonathan Taylor watch, George. Now it's time to get that back ready to see, is he at practice? Is he at the facility? Will he be at the game on Sunday? Is we go into what we believe early on to be the final week of Jonathan Taylor not on the active roster? So we have some player watching. We got some game preparation to get to as well. So it's going to be another loaded Thursday potty, and hopefully you do join us and get set here for what is going to be a fun week before matchup against the Colts. So with that said, have a great rest of your week. We'll talk to you on Thursday right here on the Blue Horseshoe Podcast.